Well, hi, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Our guest today is Joe Perello. He's the president and CEO of Props, a first of its kind marketing technology platform that enables direct to consumer brands. You can learn more at their website, www.props.co. Joe is also currently a member of the board of directors of New York Cruise Lines. And before I tell you more about his very interesting career and before I stumble over more words, Joe, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Hey, Mark. Thank you for having me. Good to be here. Appreciate it.
Well, I'm excited to hear your story, and there's a lot we can talk about here today. But prior to Props, Joe co-founded and led a New York-based digital agency. He bootstrapped that into an award-winning shop. In 2003, then Mayor Michael Bloomberg appointed Joe to be the first chief marketing officer of the city of New York. So Joe and his team created the first self-funded marketing and promotional engine in the city's history. They generated more than $100 million and led to unprecedented results in tourism. Now, Joe was also previously vice president of business development for the New York Yankees. During some of their most successful seasons, he reported to the late George Steinbrenner. And Joe is a graduate of the University of Delaware with a degree in history or journalism. So, Joe, again, thank you for being here. You're, I'm sure, interested in New York Yankees history. Was that part of your draw with taking a job there?
No, actually, I worked for a credit card bank at the time called MB&A America, and the Yankees were my client. So I'd go visit them all the time. Got to know their head of marketing, who's now, his name's Derek Schiller. He's now the CEO of the Atlanta Braves and their sports properties, and got to know Derek pretty well. And he was like, "Hey, I'm going to leave here. You want to take my job?" I said, "Sure, I'd love to." Yeah.
And
So there was no plan to no plan to be the VP of the New York Yankees. It sort of just happened, and I got lucky.
Well, I'm glad you could take advantage of that opportunity. As they say, luck benefits the prepared. So, more than just luck involved there. And maybe we can come back and talk a little bit about that in addition to your current company, Props. But, Joe, as we normally do here, I would love to hear your story, thinking back the different things you've done. What's your favorite mistake?
Hey, I thought about this a lot. I think the premise of the podcast is great because if you're not making mistakes, you're not learning, you're not doing big enough stuff,
Right.
and you're not learning. And the biggest mistake that I made that turned out not to be a mistake was separating myself from certain relationships with people. And I'll tell you why I thought that I was making a mistake at the time. And the reason is because I was sort of like professionally raised as a sort of a networker, right? Like, biz dev is important, sales is important. I've been in marketing my whole life. So, in marketing, you're like, grow, make more connections, build more relationships, right? It's just like, you don't shrink. If you're shrinking, you're failing. So I would essentially try and build relationships with as many people as I could because I thought that was our pathway to success. It wasn't until really I was much older that I started to be more disciplined about the relationships that I would invest time in. Now, this was still really hard for me to say no to someone. And especially as like a networker, right? Or as a growth person. Really hard for me to say no. Well, I was in a business relationship with people, and I had a really hard time separating. And I did. It was very difficult. And I felt in my bones that it was the wrong thing to do. I felt like I was making a mistake by severing, my relationship with these business associates. And it turned out to be the best thing I ever did. It was the smartest thing I ever did because it put me on a path towards where I am today, right? Which is the co-founder of a software company, essentially in charge of my own destiny to a large degree, and unencumbered by relationships that I didn't.
Yeah. So
it was really hard for me to do it at the time, but it's turned out to be the right thing to do.
Yeah. Now, did that mean leaving a company, or did it just?
Yeah. Meant leaving a company that I helped start.
Okay. So I want to make sure it meant leaving a company, not just sort of breaking off. Hey, I'm not going to meet you for lunch every month anymore, or whatever the networking was. This was.
No, I mean, I include those in there, but those are sort of those are easier. And I have separated myself from certain people that I decided I wasn't going to invest any more time in this relationship. And again, and those were hard. They're hard to do because as a biz dev person, you're like, well, they could be a prospect one day. Like it could turn into something. But I made this decision, and my wife has actually been a big part of it, right? Because she's more tough when it comes to relationships with me. She's, she sort of has, she's more skeptical in a good way than I am. I'm just like, no, everyone's great. It's all great. We're all going to be fine.
Could be the mistake of being a little too trusting.
Yeah, I wouldn't say trusting, but more willing to invest the time.
Okay.
Into the relationship to see where it would come. So my wife's rubbed off on me in a good way.
Yeah. So when you left that company, I mean, what were the reasons for doing so, and why would you do it if it felt like a mistake at the time?
Well, I mean, look, it's a work divorce, right? So divorces are hard, right? And I could have either said, no, I'm going to make this work, or no, I'm going to separate. And it was the right thing to do, is separate. Because I wanted to go one way, my colleagues wanted to go another way. The relationship was sort of deteriorating anyway, and it was the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do for them. It was the right thing to do for me. It was just really, really, really hard to do at the time, to say I'm going to separate.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it was painful. I mean, was it just a question? It sounds like you knew it was the right thing to do. Was there just fear of, well, then what next? Was that not lined up clearly?
Totally. I had no idea what I was going to do next. That's really where the fear was. It was like, all right, yeah, this relationship probably isn't working. I probably could make it work, and I don't have a safety net, right? So that the fear stepped in big time, right? And I did this at a point in my life where I had mortgages and private school and tuition, and like most middle-aged guys have.
Yeah. So that's some context where, I mean, what I hear you saying is it was necessary, but it was painful and it created a lot of uncertainty. But how did you come to start viewing it as the best thing that happened to you? It was feeling like a mistake, or it was feeling really uncertain.
Yeah.
What happened next?
It's so ironic how things happen. I mean, I remember taking the train home that day, just feeling really, really down, like this has ended. Not sure if I really got anything out of the relationship. I of course I did, right? Yeah. In hindsight, but just down. And a friend called me and is like, hey, I came across this company and they're looking for a leader, and I thought you'd be great. Can I connect you to the co-founder? It was like that day.
Yeah. Huh.
I was on the train, and so I don't know if I sort of clung to that because I was so unclear on what I was going to do. But I ended up coming to meet the co-founders of what Props used to be. It's very, very different now. Yeah. I mean, it's a different company. But I met the investors and they recruited me, and so that set me on this path. And so at that point, not soon after, I was like, wow, this is probably a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm glad I severed this relationship. But there was also other people that I've made this, and I don't want you to make it seem like I'm just cutting people off left and right. I can count them on one hand.
Sure.
Like how many people I've said, okay, no more.
But these, I mean, big decisions like these are difficult. I mean, there's the judgment call if you think you're making the best decision in the moment, and then sometimes time reveals, okay, that was a mistake. I've had guests here talk about the mistake of leaving some job too soon, and someone else will have a story about I stuck with that too long. Like these are,
Yeah.
I mean, it could be a mistake to stick with something. Do we stick with it? Do we say, look, it's not working and move on, move on? I mean, these are really difficult judgment calls. We might not have 100% clarity before making a decision.
It's very hard, especially if you're a part of making the enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
Because at some point it feels like you have to cut off like one of your fingers.
Mm-hmm.
And so that clouds your judgment a lot. You have personal pride, is involved. I don't care, if anyone has their ego in check, your personal pride plays a big role in this. Then there's the fear of the uncertainty of the future.
Right.
And then there's always, someone's going to judge my career. None of that shit matters. Excuse me. None of that stuff matters.
Yeah.
Like I look back at it and I'm like, my God, I learned so much, like so much of what I did sort of running an advertising agency. I'm applying it, every single day.
Yeah.
And teaching the younger staff that I have on how to manage clients and set their expectations the right way, right? And sort of say no to clients that I don't think are going to pay out. All of that is so valuable in my work today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And teaching my team how to sort of jump over the 15 years of me doing that. Like if I could teach them how to do that in one, that'd be great.
Yeah. So first off, not a huge mistake to say shit. That's fine. So I've said it once now. I don't think we need to mark the episode explicit for that. I appreciate you mentioning the learning, Joe, because that's really what the podcast here is meant to celebrate, right? It's not to make ourselves feel bad about the mistakes, but to celebrate the learning and the growth. And you're alluding to that. And I guess I was going to ask, a follow-up question. If that previous situation was something you described as a work divorce, were there any kind of lessons learned or reflections, or are there anything that you could do differently to prevent some of that that situation popping up in the future?
I mean, the first thing is, you have to take responsibility for the relationships that you build. Like, sort of in the heat of battle, you could sort of lay blame on others, but I could have managed a relationship differently. That doesn't mean that the outcome may have been different. Right. But I looked and said, how could I have managed this relationship differently? And I could have absolutely positively changed things. So number one is I took responsibility for the relationships and how they worked out.
Yeah.
And I took a lot of lessons from that and said, okay, it can't always be one-sided. Sure, you have to protect your integrity and you have to protect sort of what you care about, but you also have to compromise, every single day. And when I look back on things, also it's like, hey, you know what? I wasn't willing to compromise on certain things. And that certainly contributed to, our relationship. And I take responsibility for that.
Right.
And it's also helped me, in my new endeavor and saying, you got to take responsibility. You're not perfect. And other people's points of view matter. And it's very likely they're probably better and you should listen to them.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, we can take responsibility for our own actions or our own inaction. Like you said, a work relationship in an organization, it's more complex. It's like you said, you can learn and do things differently. It doesn't mean the situation necessarily is going to work out because other people have their role they play. If you made certain mistakes and along the way, and they've also made mistakes.
Yeah.
How do we?
But, you can only take responsibility for your own behavior. You cannot control how everyone else is going to behave, and it actually sort of got me into which is like a craze today. But I started reading sort of Ryan Holiday sort of became popular at the time that I was going through this. And it was very appropriate, right? Because his whole approach to stoicism is focus on the things you can control.
Right.
And it's always been sort of a mantra of mine. But at the time I started, really taking that to heart. I had time, I could read, and that had made a big difference for me is, well, what can I control here?
Yeah.
And the only thing you control is your own behavior, your own reaction to what happens to you. You can't control other people's behavior. And so if you have to take responsibility for yourself, and B, you can only control what happens, how you react to things,
right,
and do your best.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I think it's interesting within a team dynamic, if people are making mistakes, like I think, admitting a mistake, if both sides or multiple parties within a team are willing to admit mistakes and work through it, I think that's probably helpful in terms of relationships. But if everyone sort of doubles down or digs in on their mistake, well, it's not my mistake. It's it's not the mistake of what I said. It's your mistake and how you reacted to it. That could get dysfunctional.
100%. And it's also, that has been a tenet of how we work at Props today. And it, part of it is because I want to create an environment where, you could be wrong. And, our co-founder, Oliver Blodgett, feels the same way. And we don't always succeed, but we try to create an environment where people can propose things and be wrong. And we're wrong all the time. And sort of when we say, hey, let's try this, let's try that, we could be wrong and we could be proven wrong. We're like, yeah, we were wrong. Okay, move on. Not the end of the world. You know what I mean? We don't know everything. So, I mean, it's harder when you've got younger staff because they don't want to look bad. Right? Your team, everyone wants to look good. I want to look good. Everyone wants to look good. You don't want to look stupid. So you really have to go out of your way to say, okay, there's no bad ideas. Everyone speak up. And then you sort of match that with the intensity of performing every day.
Yeah.
Right. So there's like, okay, I want everyone to speak up, but we also have to deliver for the client. And therefore, either we perform or we're out.
Right. Yeah.
So you have to manage the intensity of delivering results every day, and also sort of the openness of allowing people to come up with ideas. And it's a balance. So it's like you almost have to be, you have to do the opposite every day, because managing intense performance, requires accountability and follow through and follow up. And, and creating a creative environment where you can be open means, relaxing all those things temporarily.
Well, I mean, it seems like if you don't go out of your way to create an environment where it's okay through your words and your actions, where it's okay to try new things that don't work out, how can there be creativity if people are in constant fear of being wrong or constant fear of making a mistake? It can't happen, right?
Then the other thing here is you also have to have people that have a little bit of a thicker skin, like it's not personal.
Right.
Because you can't just walk around and say, okay, we're all sort of snowflakes here and you're always right.
Right.
You also have to sort of merge it with, yes, but we have to perform at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So if you come up with an idea and you were wrong, you have to be able to say, hey, that wasn't right. I would do it this way next time, and still have the same level of enthusiasm going forward. If you propose something and it didn't work out, you can't shrink.
Sure.
You have to be able to have the fortitude to come back and say, well, I'm going to come back smarter, and not lose any sense of confidence. And that just comes from not taking things personally.
So how do you help encourage that as a leader? You're working with younger people. Are there things you can do or your co-founder can do to help them bounce back?
Yeah, so we have rules now in our meetings, right? So we have daily performance meetings where we only talk about the performance. And then we have meetings where it's more open, like where it's anything's allowable. And then we have sort of quarterly meetings where it's like there's no rules. You could propose anything. You've got to think it through. You can't just like, oh, well, I think we should do this. Well, you got to make the case. And so but what's funny is Oliver and I are the ones that have to discipline ourselves not to get off track. Like, we're the ones who violate the rules the most time.
So you could be wrong.
We're the ones who say, well, we get off track and we try and focus on daily performance when we're doing a brainstorming thing because we want to win.
Sure.
Right. But I think the thing that we say the most for the whole team is, I don't want to be right. I just want to win. That's what we say over and over and over again. I don't want to be right. I just want to win.
Yeah. Well, and I think, this idea of wanting to be right or needing to be right. I mean, if I think it all connects where you talk about an environment where you can be wrong. Like, I'm playing around with different subtitles for the book I'm writing, kind of inspired by the podcast here. And one phrase, I don't know if it makes a good subtitle, is something like how getting it wrong helps us get it right. Because that environment where you can be wrong leads to improvement. I mean, you talk about wins, like learning from small losses leads to wins. So you think of the football analogy, you come out, play the game, you got a certain strategy on offense, you're getting stoned. You've got to learn from that. And those small losses the first couple times you have the ball could lead to an adjustment that then leads the game. So the worst criticism, of a football coach or of a business owner is like being stubborn. Like, well, we had our game plan and we just needed to execute it better. At some point, you need to say the game plan was a mistake and pivot, right?
100%. Especially today. So look, I grew up sort of as a direct marketer, right? And direct marketers, it's just test and learn and test and learn. So, you just to say you run 9 campaigns, 8 of them failed, 1 of them was a winner, and so you won.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And so in the digital media landscape, we're in the direct response business. And so you're not going to pick a winner tomorrow. You're going to test 10 things. 7 of them are going to fail. And you're only going to have spent a little bit of money on those 7. 3 of them are going to win it, and you're going to have unlocked a new audience, and you're going to unlock success. Yeah. If you don't go in, you have to go in it like, okay, most of these things are going to fail, and you put the guardrails on there so you don't blow the whole enterprise up with those 7 failures. And that's direct response marketing 101. I try to apply that to sort of everything that we do. Is you've got to test and learn. There's a Silicon Valley mantra, fail fast and cheap, same idea. Yeah. And I think that has proliferated most of our culture today way more than it existed when I entered the workforce, in the 90s. Yeah. But it was, if you fail, you stink.
Say that again. If you failed, you.
When I started in the workforce, it was, if you fail, you stink. Yeah. And today, if you fail and you come away with the lessons and how you can apply it, then you've won.
Okay.
Provided that you can execute better the next time.
That's the learning, right? So, it seems, I love that idea of test and learn. You're right. Entrepreneurship, lean startup methodologies talk about, testing your hypothesis. At some point, you're shifting from opinions that lead to a hypothesis, and then at some point that gets replaced with data. And
100%.
How do you fight the urge? I imagine someone sees the early returns, if you will, like, well, we just need to give it more time. Like, there's a judgment call of how much data is enough to decide that strategy is winning or losing, or does that become pretty obvious if you're actually looking at data?
In the digital marketing space, I think it's easy because you have so many different options.
Mhm.
You have so many different audiences. It's almost like you can't really screw up major league if you switch gears too early.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? It's not, we're not making Super Bowl commercials here,
Mhm.
right? That you could really screw up.
That's a big bet.
You could screw that
Yeah.
up pretty
Yeah.
big, you know?
Yeah.
But in the world of sort of direct response marketing and content marketing, like, when we publish and promote content from our clients' websites, we'll pretty much promote 4 or 5 stories from 4 or 5 different independent experts. And 2 of them probably aren't going to work. But we've only spent $3,000 on that.
Yeah.
And so the clients are they're like, wow, it's great. I thought this was going to work awesome. It doesn't work, but these 3 others work. And we only spent a few $1,000 on that.
Right. Right.
So there's really never a disaster in my mind. The only disaster is if you don't pay attention.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to learn a little bit more about props. And you mentioned the company had pivoted. Maybe tell us a little bit about the pivot and tell
Yeah,
us more about what it is that you and props do today.
sure. So when I was recruited here by the investors, there was really no business plan. There was this like vague idea of essentially medium with brand sponsorship. And um, it was very creator focused and not really brand focused. So basically I was just like, all right, there's nothing here. We're just going to blow this up. And the only thing that's really valuable are the investors.
Mhm.
And so I was like, all right, I'll figure this out. And we came up with this idea, and I had always been married to this idea of, if you bet on authentic content in any form, my bet was you're always going to win.
Mhm.
If you don't dilute that idea, right? So we came from the world of sort of influencers, right, and branded content, and we eschewed that. We're like, that's not who we are. What we're going to do is we're going to bring the credibility and authenticity of journalism
Hmm.
to the world
Yeah.
of direct response marketing. Okay, that was really the idea. We're also going to do this using sort of the attractiveness of independent content creators. That's everyone was sort of being drawn to these influencers because, like I said, if one of them didn't work, you just use another one.
Yeah.
Now, we don't go that far. We spend a lot more time curating the content creators, right? But that was the idea, is attractiveness of we're leveraging this gig economy.
Yeah.
Then we departed big time from the original idea, and we said, there's no medium, there's no props, there's no website where we're going to drive people to. We're going to put the content where it matters most, which is on the brand's website directly.
Hmm.
Okay, seems simple. When we proposed this to our prospective clients, they were like, "What? You're going to put it on my website? Like, how?" Yes, it's going to be on your website. So it's going to be a story made by someone who has probably written for the Wall Street Journal or Condé Nast Traveler. Like, so they're legit.
Mm-hmm.
And
Good
what I
writing.
say is, your mom thinks these people are talented.
Yeah.
Put it that way.
Yeah.
Number 2, they're going to write about subject matter that is related to what you do,
Mm-hmm.
but not you.
Yeah.
So they would say, well, where's my brand? You don't need your brand in the story because it's on your website. Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah.
How are you going to get people to read it? Great question. We're going to promote it with paid media, and we're going to promote it through the author.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This was when sort of whitelisting was totally brand new. And we really had to explain that idea of whitelisting a person and spending paid media dollars to promote their story. So now, Props is now 4 years old. We've got more than a dozen clients. We've proven this model over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And essentially what we do is we publish and promote authentic content directly from our clients' websites, and we promote it through the author, reaching the audiences that are going to respond at the highest rate for that content. I'll give you a real easy example.
Great.
So one of our clients is College Ave Student Loans. Awesome company, pioneering in the student lending space. A great journey, all digital. It's really smart.
Mm-hmm.
They want to reach parents of high school seniors between the months of April and June, and only in those months. So they don't want to reach the students, right? Because the students don't have the credit to back the loan.
Right.
So we need to reach the parents. So simple. Our content creators have all written books on how to get into college, how to deal with your kids when they go into college, how to manage your kids' process of getting into college. It's all about parenting for the high school kid who's about to go to college. And they've all written books. They're all former authors. And so, 5 tips for how to get into college, what to do when your kid is worried about college, managing all the stress around that. So number one is the kids never click on that article.
Sure.
Because it's for parents.
Yeah.
2 is the parents always click on that article because they're stressed out about, this crazy process.
Yeah.
And that's how we attract people in. We never talk about College Ave. We're only talking about the process and the stress and the solutions for how to manage your kid when they're about to go to college. And this has proven to unlock audiences that would normally ignore the ad.
Yeah, that's smart. So it sounds like
now they're being introduced to College Ave, and now they become a prospect for maybe I'll use College Ave too.
Yeah,
to book loans, and it's proven to be the one of the most efficient ways for College Ave to source new loans.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Being digital, and you can look at the data and the impact there. But yeah, it sounds like there was this old mindset of people thinking, well, I need articles written about me, my firm, in other places, then people will come to my site. Well, who cares about me? They care about their problem and their situation. And
yes,
and then I'm sure through, like you said, paid promotion or good old Google search results, if you can figure that out, that's going to bring people to the website, and that content builds trust. It's informative, and like, oh, College Ave student loans seem like helpful people.
Well, you nailed it. You nailed it with the trust. You nailed it with the trust. This is a trust. You're setting a relationship up based on trust and authenticity. And the biggest shift in marketers' minds is to think like a publisher, right? Because a marketer, you said it, Mark. You said the marketer is like me first, right? Where's my brand? Where's my offer? Me.
Yeah.
The way the publisher thinks is audience. What does the audience want to read? How do I engage the audience? Audience, and then everything is engineered based on the audience.
Right.
So we let brands think like a publisher, put the audience first, since the content's on the website, then the brand can be me first, me too. Like they got to drive a commercial result. So the model is set up so that brands can actually think like publishers and still get a return. And that's why the paid media is so important.
Yeah. So I know you focus here on authenticity. Are there mistakes that marketers make? Like, what's the more common problem? Just being inauthentic, or failed attempts at authenticity? Probably, now that I'm saying that out loud, like if you're trying too hard to be authentic, it's probably not authentic.
Yeah. So that's a good question. We set up our platform to protect authenticity without forcing it. And it seems at first risky. And I'll explain. So when we curate writers and photographers and filmmakers, we do it all with a A&R team. Like imagine a record label, they have an A&R team. We have an A&R team. right? And they're out there looking for new talent, and they use, you know, manual searches with some AI to curate a group of content creators that are going to resonate, they think, the best towards the subject matter, whether we're writing for FTD or writing for AAA or we're making content for a bank or student lending. They're curating content creators that they think are going to tell the best story that's relevant to this audience. Mm-hmm. Number two, the creators actually come up with the ideas that they're going to write about. All we do is say, hey, parents are dealing with these three issues, mm-hmm. and College Ave would like to hear your thoughts on these three issues. And the creators pitch the ideas themselves. And we've created this sort of virtual edit meeting where the clients can actually see these pitch ideas and they pick one. So we're not in the middle of it. Mm-hmm. We're not, and the client's not dictating anything. So that's number one, is the stories are from the experts themselves. Number two is the creators, technically they have Final Cut. Mm-hmm. So a client can certainly make suggestions on how they want to edit. If those are reasonable suggestions, they'll get made. But the creator can say, I'm not going to publish that. Oh. I'm not going to make those edits. Mm-hmm. And because we have clients, we need to serve them. We make sure that there's another creator that mm-hmm. will fill those shoes. So we protect the integrity of the creator, mm-hmm. right? But also respect the commercial need of the client.
Yeah.
And that's where we sort of create this authenticity at every step of the way.
Well, Joe, I think you've been really authentic with us today and kind of talking through your story professionally and learning from mistakes and working there at Props. So I'll give you props for that. I guess I had to be said. It's not that creative.
You wouldn't be the first.
I know, but you could go to props.co. Don't make the mistake of going to props.com. Go to props.co, and you can learn more about Joe and Props and their approach. And let me ask one other question here, if you'll indulge me. Like that time working for George Steinbrenner. I mean, such a legendary persona. But those of us in the public may be making the mistake of being fooled by, kind of the persona or Larry David mocking him and Seinfeld and like that. Do we make the mistake of confusing the legend with the person? I'm curious what reflections you might have that you could share with us about George Steinbrenner.
I think first, I miss him dearly. I really do miss him. And working for him was a highlight of my career.
Yeah.
Number two is the thing that I learned from George the most, the boss, was what it really takes to win. Mm. What does it really take to win at anything, let alone Major League Baseball? And he, his behavior and drive really showed me this is what you have to do to win, and it's not easy. Mm-hmm. And you need diligence and persistence, and you got to pull yourself up. So the number one thing I learned from George is here's what it takes to win. Because I came from a corporate environment, and great experience at MBNA America, amazing experience, mm-hmm. but I was protected.
Yeah.
There were people around me that also wanted to win, but they would help me. They had coaching. I had help. And then you go into an environment, in the South Bronx at the Yankees, and I don't want to say it was every man for himself, but it was an environment where you had to perform. And if you didn't perform, nobody else was going to be there to perform. And thankfully, I learned really fast and did, really great work for George and loved working on the team. And, the other side of this is the New York Yankees. So, was it me? A little bit, but it was mostly the Yankees. It was mostly the Yankees. Did I get some extra revenue for the boss that he maybe wouldn't have gotten? Of course I did. I absolutely did. But look, it's the New York Yankees. So Could I have done that for the Twins? I don't know. Maybe, maybe a little bit. But the boss was a unique guy, incredibly generous.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you a quick story. You know, the boss would get really upset when you did stupid stuff,
Mm.
and rightfully. You did stupid stuff, he would get upset. If you made big mistakes, like you tried hard and you swung big and you missed, he would be right there. Hey, kid, listen, you tried it.
Huh.
Good job. Okay, we'll get him next time. Like I thought I was dead. I made some big mistakes with honest, tried hard,
Mm-hmm.
swung and missed, and he was there. Like,
Wow.
we're gonna get him. We're gonna get him next time, kid. Call me a kid because I was a kid.
But was it a difference between, not all fail, we talk about learning from mistakes and learning from failure, but I would argue not all failure is created equal. You alluded to this earlier, the failed Super Bowl commercial versus a failed experiment on a direct campaign. Do you think he distinguished between the stupid thing that shouldn't have even been tried versus, well, here's an idea everyone thought was good, but we just didn't execute, or it just didn't pan out, and that's where he was supportive?
Yes, absolutely. He would, he cared about rules, and you wanted to follow the rules. And if you didn't follow the rules in terms of like day to day, he would be upset with you. And I certainly broke some of the rules by impulsivity, or just because I was immature.
Yeah.
But no, not enough to really irk him. And also my performance was great, right? Sure. The team's performance was good. We were making money. George was happy. There are big things that we tried to do, and some of it we succeeded wildly. And George wouldn't always give you credit, but you knew he knew.
Yeah.
And then there were things where you tried and where you like failed miserably, and he knew what you were trying to do. He knew you were trying to, further the team, and he was there to pick you up and encourage you. And those are the times I remember about George the most.
Wow.
Is
wow.
when you really tried to swing big, and you failed, and he was there because he knew he wanted you to go out and do it again, try again. Maybe you'd succeed the next time. And he didn't want you to be discouraged, because you thought you were going to get yelled at unless you did something stupid.
Yeah.
And then he would yell at you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Joe, for painting, a more complete picture. I figured the caricature on Seinfeld was just that, a caricature. But it's interesting to look and see. I looked this up. So I grew up a Yankees fan when I grew up not a Yankees fan. I grew up a Detroit Tigers fan. But this was all happening in the quote unquote Bronx Zoo. In the first 23 seasons of owning the team, he changed managers 20 times, Steinbrenner did. Billy Martin alone was fired and rehired 5 times.
Yeah.
What a fascinating dynamic there.
I was fired twice by George.
You were?
Yes. And people said, look, if you didn't get fired, then you're not trying hard enough. So I was like, that's something.
So fired twice. So fired, rehired, fired, and then
rehired. Yeah.
Then you left voluntarily. So rehired twice.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. I left to go try my hand at the internet with David Bowie. That's what lured me away, to try and get rich really quick with the internet.
Back in the
.com. Yeah, that never happens. Yeah, it was too late. I got the .net. Not the .com.
Wow. Well, Joe, wow, this has been fascinating. There's so much more I wish I could ask you, but I appreciate you for your time today and everything that you have shared with us. I will encourage people to go check out props.co, learn more about what Joe and his team there are doing. And thank you again for sharing, I think, some really interesting, and nuanced perspectives about the late George Steinbrenner, the boss. So thank you again.
You got it.
That. Really appreciate it, Joe. Thank you.
All right, Mark. Take care. Thank you for having me.